had settled down, the conspirators met together to consult about the situation of affairs. At this meeting speeches were made, to which many of the Greeks gave no credence, but they were made nevertheless. Otanes recommended that the management of public affairs should be entrusted to the whole nation. To me, he said, it seems advisable that we should no longer have a single man to rule over us. The rule of one is neither good nor pleasant. Ye cannot have forgotten to what lengths Kambousi went in his haughty tyranny, and the haughtiness of the Magi ye have yourselves experienced. How indeed is it possible that monarchy should be a well-adjusted thing when it allows a man to do as he likes without being answerable? Such license is enough to stir strange and unwonted thoughts in the heart of the worthiest of men. Give a person this power, and straightway his manifold good things puff him up with pride, while envy is so natural to humankind that it cannot but arise in him. But pride and envy together include all wickedness, both of them leading on to deeds of savage violence. True it is that kings, possessing as they do all that heart can desire, ought to be void of envy, but the contrary is seen in their conduct towards the citizens. They are jealous of the most virtuous among their subjects, and wish their death, while they take delight in the meanest and basest, being ever ready to listen to the tales of slanderers. A king, besides, is beyond all other men inconsistent with himself. Pay him court in moderation, and he's angry because you do not show him more profound respect. Show him profound respect, and he's offended again, because, as he says, you fawn on him. But the worst of all is that he sets aside the laws of the land, puts men to death without trial, and subjects women to violence. The rule of the many, on the other hand, has, in the first place, the fairest of names, to wit, isonomy, and further, it's free from all those outrages which a king is wont to commit. There places are given by lot, the magistrate is answerable for what he does, and measures rest with the commonalty. I vote, therefore, that we do away with the monarchy, and raise the people to power, for the people are all in all. Such were the sentiments of Otanes. Megabyzus spoke next, and advised the setting up of an oligarchy. In all that Otanes has said to persuade you to put down monarchy, he observed, I fully concur, but his recommendation that we should call the people to power seems to me not the best advice. For there is nothing so void of understanding, nothing so full of wantonness as the unwieldy rabble. It were folly not to be born for men, while seeking to escape the wantonness of a tyrant, to give themselves up to the wantonness of a rude, unbridled mob. The tyrant, in all his doings, at least knows what he is about, but a mob is altogether devoid of knowledge. For how should there be any knowledge in a rabble, untaught, and with no natural sense of what is right and fit? It rushes wildly into state affairs with all the fury of a stream swollen in the winter, and confuses everything. Let the enemies of the Persians be ruled by democracies, but let us choose out from the citizens a certain number of the worthiest, and put the government into their hands. For thus both we ourselves shall be among the governors, and power being entrusted to the best men, it's likely that the best counsels will prevail in the state. This was the advice which Megabyzus gave, and after him Darius came forward and spoke as follows. All that Megabyzus said against democracy was well said, I think, but about oligarchy he didn't speak advisedly. For take these three forms of government, democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy, and let them each be at their best. I maintain that monarchy far surpasses the other two. What government can possibly be better than that of the very best man in the whole state? The counsels of such a man are like himself, and so he governs the mass of the people to their heart's content, while at the same time his measures against evildoers are kept more secret than in other states. Contrariwise, in oligarchies, where men vie with each other in the service of the commonwealth, fierce enmities are apt to arise between man and man, each wishing to be leader, and to carry his own measures, whence violent quarrels come, which lead to open strife, often ending in bloodshed. then monarchy is sure to follow, and this too shows how far that rule surpasses all others. Again, in a democracy it's impossible but that there will be malpractices. These malpractices, however, do not lead to enmities, but to close friendships, which are formed among those engaged in them, who must hold well together to carry on their villainies. And so things go on until a man stands forth as champion of the commonalty, and puts down the evildoers. Straightway the author of so great a service is admired by all, and from being admired soon comes to be appointed king. So that here too it's plain that monarchy is the best government. Lastly, to sum up all in a word, whence, I ask, was it that we got the freedom which we enjoy? Did democracy give it us, or oligarchy, or a monarch? As a single man recovered our freedom for us, my sentence is that we keep to the rule of one. Even apart from this, we ought not to change the laws of our forefathers when they work fairly, for to do so is not well. Such were the three opinions brought forward at this meeting. The 4 other Persians voted in favour of the last. Otanes, who wished to give his countrymen a democracy, when he found the decision against him, arose a second time and spoke thus before the assembly. Brother conspirators, it's plain that the king who is to be chosen will be one of ourselves, whether we make the choice by casting lots for the prize, or by letting the people decide which of us they will have to rule over them, or in any other way. Now, as I've neither a mind to rule nor to be ruled, I shall not enter the lists with you in this matter. I withdraw, however, on one condition. None of you shall claim to exercise rule over me or my seed forever. The 6 agreed to these terms, and Otanes withdrew and stood aloof from the contest. And still, to this day, the family of Otanes continues to be the only free family in Persia. Those who belong to it submit to the rule of the king only so far as they themselves choose. They are bound, however, to observe the laws of the land, like the other Persians. After this, the 6 took counsel together as to the fairest way of setting up a king. And first, with respect to Otanes, they resolved that if any of their own number got the kingdom, Otanes and his seed after him should receive, year by year, as a mark of special honour, a Median robe, and all such other gifts as are accounted the most honourable in Persia. And these they resolved to give him because he was the man who first planned the outbreak, and who brought the 7 together. These privileges, therefore, were assigned specially to Otanes. The following were made common to them all. It was to be free to each, whenever he pleased, to enter the palace unannounced, unless the king were in the company of one of his wives. And the king was to be bound to marry into no family excepting those of the conspirators. Concerning the appointment of a king, the resolve to which they came was the following. They would ride out together next morning into the skirts of the city, and he whose steed first neighed after the sun was up should have the kingdom. Now Darius had a groom, a sharp-witted knave, called Obares. After the meeting had broken up, Darius sent for him and said, Obares, this is the way in which the king is to be chosen. We are to mount our horses, and the man whose horse first neighs after the sun is up is to have the kingdom. If, then, you have any cleverness, contrive a plan whereby the prize may fall to us and not go to another. Truly, master, Obares answered, if it depends on this whether thou shalt be king or no, set thine heart at ease and fear nothing. I have a charm which is sure not to fail. If thou hast really aught of the kind, said Darius, hasten to get it ready. The matter doesn't brook delay, for the trial is to be tomorrow. So Obares, when he heard that, did as follows. When night came, he took one of the mares, the chief favourite of the horse which Darius rode, and tethering it in the suburb, brought his master's horse to the place. Then, after leading him round and round the mare several times, nearer and nearer to each circuit, he ended by letting them come together. And now when the morning broke, the 6 Persians, according to agreement, met together on horseback and rode out to the suburb. As they went along, they neared the spot where the mare was tethered the night before, whereupon the horse of Darius sprang forward and neighed. Just at the same time, though the sky was clear and bright, there was a flash of lightning, followed by a thunderclap. It seemed as if the heavens conspired with Darius, and hereby inaugurated him king. So the 5 other nobles leapt with one accord from their steeds, and bowed down before him, and owned him for their king. This is the account which some of the Persians gave of the contrivance of Abares, but there are others who relate the matter differently. They say that in the morning he stroked the mare with his hand, which he then hid in his trousers until the sun rose and the horses were about to start, when he suddenly drew his hand forth and put it to the nostrils of his master's horse, which immediately snorted and neighed. Thus was Darius, son of Hystaspes, appointed king. And, except the Arabians, all they of Asia were subject to him. For Cyrus, and after him Cambyses, had brought them all under. The Arabians were never subject as slaves to the Persians, but they had a league of friendship with them from the time when they brought Cambyses on his way as he went into Egypt. For had they been unfriendly, the Persians could never have made their invasion. And now Darius contracted marriages of the first rank according to the notions of the Persians, to wit, with 2 daughters of Cyrus, Atossa and Artistone, of whom Atossa had been twice married before, and one to Cambyses her brother, and once to the Magus, while the other, Artistone, was a virgin. He married also Paramis, daughter of Smerdis, son of Cyrus, and he likewise took to wife the daughter of Otanes, who had made the discovery about the Magus. And now when his power was established firmly throughout all the kingdoms, the first thing that he did was to set up a carving in stone which showed a man mounting upon a horse, with an inscription in these words following: Darius, son of Hystaspes, by aid of his good horse, here followed the horse's name, and of his good groom, Abares, got himself the kingdom of the Persians. This he set up in Persia, and afterwards he proceeded to establish 20 governments of the kind which the Persians call satrapies, assigning to each its governor, and fixing the tribute which was to be paid him by the several nations. And generally he joined together in one satrapy the nations that were neighbours, but sometimes he passed over the nearer tribes, and put in their stead those which were more remote. The following is an account of these governments, and of the yearly tribute which they paid to the king. Such as brought their tribute in silver were ordered to pay according to the Babylonian talent, while the euboic was the standard measure for such as brought gold. Now the Babylonian talent contains 70 euboic minae. During all the reign of Cyrus, and afterwards when Cambyses ruled, there were no fixed tributes, but the nations severally brought gifts to the king. On account of this and other like doings, the Persians say that Darius was a huckster, and Cambyses a master, and Cyrus a father. For Darius looked to making a gain in everything. Cambyses was harsh and reckless, while Cyrus was gentle and procured them all manner of goods. The Ionians, the Magnesians of Asia, the Aeolians, the Carians, the Lycians, the Melians, and the Pamphylians paid their tribute in a single sum, which was fixed at 400 talents of silver. These formed together the first satrapy. The Mysians, Lydians, Lazonians, Cabalians, Hagenians paid the sum of 500 talents. This was the second satrapy. The Hellespontians of the right coast as one enters the straits, the Phrygians, the Asiatic Thracians, the Paphlagonians, the Mariandynians, and the Syrians paid a tribute of 360 talents. This was the third satrapy. The Cilicians gave 360 white horses, one for each day of the year, and 500 talents of silver. Of this sum, 140 talents went to pay the cavalry which guarded the country, while the remaining 360 were received by Darius. This was the fourth satrapy. The country reaching from the city of Posideum, built by Amphilochus, son of Amphiaraus, on the confines of Syria and Cilicia, to the borders of Egypt, excluding therefrom a district which belonged to Arabia and was free from tax, paid a tribute of 350 talents. All Phoenicia, Palestine, Syria, and Cyprus were herein contained. This was the 5th satrapy. From Egypt and the neighbouring parts of Libya, together with the towns of Cyrene and Barca, which belonged to the Egyptian satrapy, the tribute which came in was 700 talents. These 700 talents did not include the profits of the fisheries of Lake Moeris, nor the corn furnished to the troops at Memphis. Corn was supplied to 120,000 Persians who dwelt at Memphis in the quarter called the White Castle, and to a number of auxiliaries. This was the 6th satrapy. The Satygidians, the Gadarians, the Dadatki, and the Apariti, who were all reckoned together, paid a tribute of 170 talents. This was the 7th satrapy. Susa and the other parts of Scythia paid 300 talents. This was the 8th satrapy. From Babylonia and the rest of Assyria were drawn 1,000 talents of silver and 500 boy eunuchs. This was the 9th satrapy. Agpatana and the other parts of Media, together with the Paricanians and the Orthocorybantes, paid in all 450 talents. This was the 10th satrapy. The Caspians, Porcicae, Pantimathi, and Daditai were joined in one government and paid the sum of 200 talents. This was the 11th satrapy. From the Bactrian tribes as far as the Igli, the tribute received was 360 talents. This was the 12th satrapy. From Pactica and Armenia and the countries reaching thence to the Euxine, the sum drawn was 400 talents. This was the 13th satrapy. The Sagaltians, Sarangians, Thamanians, Utians, and Macians, together with the inhabitants of the islands in the Erythraean Sea, where the king sends those whom he banishes, furnished together a tribute of 600 talents. This was the 14th satrapy. The Sarkans and Caspians gave 250 talents. This was the 15th satrapy. The Parthians, Chorasmians, Sogdians, and Aryans gave 300. This was the 16th satrapy. The Paricanians and Ethiopians of Asia furnished a tribute of 400 talents. This was the 17th satrapy. The Matianians, Saspires, and Alorodians were rated to pay 200 talents. This was the 18th satrapy. The Musci, Tiberini, Macrones, Mossynoeci, and Maries had to pay 300 talents. This was the 19th satrapy. The Indians, who are more numerous than any other nation with which we're acquainted, paid a tribute exceeding that of every other people, to wit 360 talents of gold dust. This was the 20th satrapy. If the Babylonian money here spoken of be reduced to the euboic scale, it will make 9,540 such talents, and if the gold be reckoned at 13 times the worth of silver, the Indian gold dust will come to 4,680 talents. Add those two amounts together, and the whole revenue which came into Darius year by year will be found to be in euboic money 14,560 talents, not to mention parts of a talent. Such was the revenue which Darius derived from Asia and a small part of Libya. Later in his reign, the sum was increased by the tribute of the islands and of the nations of Europe as far as Thessaly. The great king stores away the tribute which he receives after this fashion. He melts it down, and while it's in a liquid state, runs it into earthen vessels, which are afterwards removed, leaving the metal in a solid mass. When money is wanted, he coins as much of this bullion as the occasion requires. Such then were the governments, and such the amounts of tribute at which they were assessed respectively. Persia alone has not been reckoned among the tributaries, and for this reason, because the country of the Persians is altogether exempt from tax. The following peoples paid no settled tribute, but brought gifts to the king. First, the Ethiopians bordering upon Egypt, who were reduced by Cambyses when he made war on the long-lived Ethiopians, and who dwell about the sacred city of Nysa and have festivals in honor of Dionysus. The grain on which they and their next neighbors feed is the same as that used by the Calantian Indians. Their dwelling houses are underground. Every third year these two nations brought, and they still bring to my day, 2 koinekes of virgin gold, 200 logs of ebony, 5 Ethiopian boys, and 12 elephant tusks. The Colchians and the neighboring tribes who dwell between them and the Caucasus, for so far the Persian rule reaches, while north of the Caucasus no one fears them any longer, undertook to furnish a gift which in my day was still brought every 5th year, consisting of 100 boys and the same number of maidens. The Arabs brought every year 1,000 talents of frankincense. Such were the gifts which the king received over and above the tribute money. The way in which the Indians get the plentiful supply of gold which enables them to furnish year by year so vast an amount of gold dust to the king is the following. Eastward of India lies a tract which is entirely sand. Indeed, of all the inhabitants of Asia, concerning whom anything certain is known, the Indians dwell the nearest to the east and to the rising of the sun. Beyond them, the whole country is desert on account of the sand. The tribes of Indians are numerous and don't all speak the same language. Some are wandering tribes, others not. They who dwell in the marshes along the river live on raw fish, which they take in boats made of reeds, each formed out of a single joint. These Indians wear a dress of sedge, which they cut in the river and bruise. Afterwards they weave it into mats, and wear it, as we wear a breastplate. Eastward of these Indians are another tribe, called Padians, who are wanderers and live on raw flesh. This tribe is said to have the following customs. If one of their number be ill, man or woman, they take the sick person, and if he be a man, the men of his acquaintance proceed to put him to death, because, they say, his flesh would be spoilt for them if he pined and wasted away with sickness. The man protests he is not ill in the least, but his friends will not accept his denial. In spite of all he can say, they kill him and feast themselves on his body. So also if a woman be sick, the women, who are her friends, take her and do with her exactly the same as the men. If one of them reaches to old age, about which there is seldom any question, as commonly before that time they have had some disease or other, and so have been put to death, but if a man, notwithstanding, comes to be old, then they offer him in sacrifice to their gods, and afterwards eat his flesh. There is another set of Indians whose customs are very different. They refuse to put any live animal to death. They sow no corn and have no dwelling houses. Vegetables are their only food. Vegetables are their only food. There's a plant which grows wild in their country, bearing seed about the size of millet seed in a calyx. Their wont is to gather this seed, and having boiled it, calyx and all, to use it for food. If one of them is attacked with sickness, he goes forth into the wilderness and lies down to die. No one has the least concern either for the sick or for the dead. All the tribes which I've mentioned mate together in the open like the brute beasts. They have also the same tint of skin which approaches that of the Ethiopians. Their seed, which enters into the women, is not white like that of other men, but black like their skin. The seed of the Ethiopians is also black. Their country is a long way from Persia towards the south, nor had King Darius ever any authority over them. Besides these, there are Indians of another tribe, who border on the city of Caspityrus and the country of Pactaica. These people dwell northward of all the rest of the Indians and follow nearly the same mode of life as the Bactrians. They are more warlike than any of the other tribes, and from them the men are sent forth who go to procure the gold. For it's in this part of India that the sandy desert lies. Here in this desert there live amid the sand great ants, in size somewhat less than dogs, but bigger than foxes. The Persian king has a number of them, which have been caught by the hunters in the land whereof we're speaking. Those ants make their dwellings underground, and like the Greek ants,